Thank you all for coming very much. Mike Reeder.
Thank you, Al. Thank you. He's the only one that works in this whole place. It's great to see you guys out on a Bengals game. Who day? Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, I just thought I never prepare anything for these things, so it might be a little loosey-goosey, but I bring usually things that are motivating me at the time, or things that I'm interested in, or things that I think are sort of suited to the subject that I wanted to talk about. But unfortunately, I don't really have a subject right now. But I thought I would talk about, if there's people here that are collectors or wanting to be collectors, what makes something collectible, or what makes you motivated to become interested in instrument or vintage guitars. And a lot of times it's just really honestly, it's what you like or what you enjoy playing, or maybe sometimes it's whatever your favorite band played, or that kind of thing. As you mature as instruments, a lot of people start seeking for things like tone and feel and style. But as a beginner, there's lots of cool guitars that are really desirable in the lower price range, and older guitars. I mean, you could start collecting with like Silvertones or Ks, or anything like that from the 50s or 60s, and those can be as cheap as a couple $100. And they're great guitars. When I was young, you really couldn't get a very good playing guitar. You would if you wanted to spend a couple $100, you were kind of stuck with kind of a crappy Silvertone that didn't play well. But nowadays, there's a lot of good instruments that are new too, and for players. So you're not really stuck at doing vintage guitars anymore. So that's how these guitars became so popular, because people that played 50s and 60s guitars fell in love with these instruments, and then as the time went on in the 70s, a lot of the quality of the instruments went down. And it happened across the board with most instruments, especially like American instruments. Fenders, Gibsons, Martins, the whole bit, a lot of the quality went down. I mean, there's still a lot of good guitars from that time period, but the reason these are so desirable is not just because they are, cool old guitars, but because they sound good. And, Scotty was nice enough to come today. He's going to play some of these things when we're done. That being said, a lot of my guitars don't get used all the time. So, they might have old strings, or you might hear like a dirty pot. I mean, that happens with all old things when they sit. The potentiometers get dusty. So if you hear that, that doesn't mean it's not, it's not working. It's just kind of the fact what happens with old guitars. So one of the things I brought were these two Esquires here. These are some of the coolest things I've ever had, and I got lucky to get them recently. It's been about a month, I think, since I got these, maybe 3 weeks. They're both 1952s. They were purchased by the gentleman's father in Madison, Indiana. And he bought one, and then he bought another one for his son so they could learn to play together. And they walked into a friend of mine's store, and he called me and said, these guitars are here, they're for sale. Would you like to get them? And in the course of a few days, I ended up with them. But when I took them apart, I was the first person to ever take them apart. The neck dates are the same day, which is really, really, really cool. Esquires, I don't know if you guys know a whole lot about Fenders, but an Esquire is a Telecaster without the neck pickup. It has the same pickup, and they also have the same routes. They use the same bodies. They just left the pickup out, and it's solid pick guard. And the way they work is this position here is a mute position, which Scotty will demonstrate later. It has like sort of a bassy sound, because at this time period, a lot of people did like country swing and country, and they would play like the bass notes with their thumbs. The guitar players would. So that's what that sound was for. And then the middle position allows you to have the tone knob, which is this, and the volume. So I actually play an Esquire, I play a 57, the one up there with the cowhide. It still has the original circuit like this. So what I do in that middle position is I roll the tone down so it's bassier, and it sort of simulates a normal Telecaster sound like when you have a neck pickup. generally, if you're not an experienced guitar player, the neck pickup almost always has a bassier sound because it's closer to that farther up. The farther back to the bridge you get, the closer you get to where there's the end of the intonation range, you have a more trebly sound. So when I do that and I roll that tone off, it's sort of to simulate, a Telecaster sound. So I'll do that, and then I'll flip to here. And when you flip to this position, it's just the lead. But in Esquires, it bypasses the tone knob. So it's just straight through. And it's a different sound than a Tele. I think it's a more pure sound, but it is often pretty bright. So, that's how Esquires work. There's slight differences through the years, but 52 Esquires are pretty rare. And to find two matching ones from the same family is pretty much unheard of. So, that's a really cool set. I was telling Scotty earlier, he was playing them. I read the pickups, and I don't remember the readings, but they were quite different. I mean, like 2 ohm difference, which is huge. Typically, they'll be like, 6.5 to 7. One of these was weaker. It was like 5.8 or something. But they both sound great. And, a lot of times when it comes to pickups, people think, the louder their own rating, the better they sound. But it's not true. I've had gold tops that had like really weak humbuckers. Like I sold a 57 gold top to Eric Johnson, and it read like 5.4, which is like super low for a PAF pickup, but it sounded amazing. And so that some of that stuff is just miss. And it also matters with amps and stuff. But so that's sort of my newest, coolest acquisition for myself that I'm passionate about. I just love Esquires, and to find 2 original ones is like unheard of.
Is that some flame on the back of that neck?
Yeah, they got some figure on the back of the necks.
Nice.
This one especially.
Nice.
They're both pretty light. What do you think, Scotty? Like 7-ish, somewhere in there?
6, 8, 7.
Yeah, I mean, they're both pretty light. This one might be a little bit heavier. And the guy that I got them from, he wrote me a little note, which I left at home, but he told the story, and I think he sort of had a falling out with his father, and his father kept the guitars, and when he passed away, he got them back. I don't think he let him play them, like very much. Like he kept them in the closet or whatever. So he didn't really want them. He just wanted rid of them. So that's the story with these 2 guitars, and these cases this is called a thermometer case. This is the earliest style of Fender case. And it's sort of shaped like a old school thermometer that used to hang on the wall. They also did what they call poodle case, which I don't have an example here of, but you can go out on the internet and see those. These cases alone, these cases are crazy expensive and super rare.
Do you know where they were purchased from?
I don't remember, but it was somewhere close to that area. They had lived in that area their entire life. And, it's sort of sad in a way that, he had no love for the instruments at all. But he did, they stayed together their entire life. And they were used. So I don't know if he never really learned to play. But his dad must have played them because somebody played the guitars. That's a pretty cool thing right there. I don't remember the neck dates. I think they were like December of 52 or maybe a little bit before. But I have pictures on the internet. I'll share some of those later. But, cool guitars,
So, Mike, the Esquire.
Yeah.
Was the Telecaster made the same time as the Esquire?
Yeah, they made the sort of the way it started with Tellys was there was a no-caster.
No-caster, right.
And the first no-casters didn't say anything. They just said Fender. And those were the first Telly-shaped instruments.
Yeah.
Then they made a broadcaster. So it would say Fender and broadcaster. And then they got not really sued by Gretsch, but Gretsch sent Leo a letter and said, we own broadcaster because they had drums out that were broadcaster. Actually, I'm wrong. The broadcaster was first. Then Gretsch said they can't use broadcaster. Then he cut off the broadcaster. Then the no-caster came, sorry. And then after that, they started the Telecaster. And at the same time they started the Telecaster in late 1951, 52, they had the Esquire. Some of the earliest ones were actually made out of pine, but they quickly went to making them out of ash, which is what this is. And this is what people call a blonde finish, even though it looks probably pretty solid yellow to you guys. You can actually see the wood grain through it. As time went on through the 60s, they made this a lot thicker and it becomes a lot harder to kind of see the grain. And often, like when you get in the 70s, there'll be white guitars and there'll also be like blonde guitars, and it's really kind of hard to tell the difference because you can't see the grain as much, but yeah.
Did you ever meet Leo Fender?
I'm sorry? I did not ever meet Leo. I met some people that worked for him, it's some of the original guys, but I never got to meet him, unfortunately. One of his people that worked for him gave me a check from Leo, like his paycheck, so I have that. It's pretty cool. Yeah. And, since we're staying on the Fender kick, I may need your help, E, at some point, because I won't be able to get too far with this, but this is another kind of local guitar, just to keep the theme going. It's obviously gold sparkle, and this came from a country swing band out of sort of over towards Lawrenceburg, Indiana area, Rising Sun in there. I bought this guitar probably 20 years ago. It is a 55 or 6, and the sparkle finishes were never actually done by Fender. They sent them out. And originally, this guitar was blue sparkle, and underneath it is the original blue sparkle. And at some point, the band that this gentleman played in changed their name to Acapulco Gold, and they changed it and they sent it back and they had it done in gold. So that was the story I got, and I got you can still see the blue sparkle underneath here, and also I have a matching double lap steel. It's actually pedal steel that's in the matching blue sparkle as well. Wow. Any custom color in maple neck Fenders went from 54 into 59. 59 is a transition year. If you see a maple neck guitar from the 50s and a color, it's extremely, extremely rare. There's just very, very few custom colored 50s Stratocasters. And to see a sparkle one is even more rare. What the guy told me is when they sourced this, they couldn't find the actual gold flake that was big enough that they wanted, so that they sourced this through a dentist. That's how they got this gold this big. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was the story I got. Talking about collecting, guitars like this that are sort of one-offs or sort of altered by the factory a few times fall in a category where it's often hard to appraise. I do a lot of appraisals. There's different feelings about like how much of a negative that is or not. But because it was done by the factory and it's got a cool story, in my opinion, it's not that big of a negative. In the past, early on, let's say the 90s, this guitar would have been worth quite a bit less because it had been painted twice. But anymore, it's just so hard to find anything that it's not like that anymore. And once again, this is extremely light. I mean, here, pass this around. Just do me a favor. On these Fender guitars, don't rub the logos because you can wipe them off. And also, please don't push on the pick guards because they're very fragile.
Where'd you get that one?
It came out of like Lawrenceburg, Indiana. I bought it from, I think it was the nephew of the guy. And he told me the Acapulco Gold thing. I went on the internet and I tried to find a bunch of I tried to find some things from the band. I couldn't find much. I found something out of like San Francisco. I think they ended up going out there. And I was hoping I could find them with the guitar, but I didn't see any pictures. No.
You have a picture of the band?
No, I think I just found like an album cover or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It would
I'm
be
pretty
cool
sure it
to
was the
see
same
guitar,
band.
like if they were on a picture.
I know, that's what I wanted to find. That's what I was
That would be
hoping.
way cool.
Yeah. When I do research, I always try to find that kind of stuff. I don't know if you guys noticed, but back there is a Roy Clark guitar, also a Glenn Campbell guitar, which I recently got. And
In the case?
the green one, yeah. That was owned by Glenn Campbell. And it took me probably a year to find a photo of him playing that guitar. And I finally did just recently. He was on a TV show. His initials are in the neck. He had 3 of those guitars, and that was the only one. If there's people up there, they can come sit down if they want. Hey, E, can you hand me that Strat, please? So, just to keep the Stratocaster thing going, I was talking about maple necks as opposed to rosewood board necks. This is a rosewood board neck. It's one of the very first ones. It's a 1960. And when they first started these, they did what they call slab boards. And the reason they do that is it's hard to see, but if you look down this neck, it's flat across the bottom. After 62, late 62, they go to what they call veneer neck, and it's sort of like smiley face, like arched. And the first rosewood boards, the slab boards, are the most desirable ones. And they really do have a different sound. You wouldn't think that would make a difference. But the thicker rosewood board actually does make a pretty big difference in the sound. This is also a guitar that I recently purchased through an estate kind of thing. It came with that twin up there, which is a 59 twin. They were a set together. And so I love slab board Strats. They're one of my favorite sounding guitars of all. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Stratocasters. I just love Stratocasters, but personally when I go to use them, I don't know, I just never use them that much. But all original, one owner guitar, never screwed with. This is what they call like a two-tone sunburst. It's got a very slight red. The earlier ones are like that. And then eventually they go to a three-tone, which has a lot more red in the middle. And it's still, yeah.
I'm sorry, okay.
No, anytime. Yeah, I'm just rambling.
So with the slab board,
Uh-huh.
it's like a slab of rosewood stuck onto the neck.
Exactly.
Does it have a flat radius then?
No, it's still radius, the
Still
same.
radius.
And the earlier ones are much more radius than modern day Stratocasters.
I still don't, I know that there's but I don't really get the difference between these.
Okay, so I'll tell you what. Here, show them. If you look at the bottom of the rosewood, it's flat, but it's still arched on the top.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's what I thought. The
yeah.
bottom of it's flat.
The bottom of it's flat.
But on a non,
A veneer rosewood board is not flat. Yeah, and it actually is quite a bit thicker.
So what makes it curved then?
Well, do we have another Strat up there, E, that's got a radius, like a veneer?
It's flat, it's flat on the
yeah, so it's radiused, but
bottom. Yeah,
it's
flat on the
still
bottom.
flat on the bottom, so
Bottom's flat. Okay.
it
Just
needs to
stuck on
flat.
And they only did that for, 59 when they first started doing the rosewood necks, late 59, into middle of 62, and then they go to the veneer. It's just a weird time period for Stratocasters, and that's also when they go to the different color changes too. Strats they have their own kind of changes, but there's like some changes in the plastic and some other things that happen as well. But so anyway, that's the sort of the Fender world that I brought here today. So we'll talk about one of my favorite guitars of all time, the Les Paul. I won't go through the whole history, but this is a 58, which is the first year for the humbucker, the famous PAF humbucker. 57 is the first year, but so 57 and 58 are gold like this, and then they have these humbuckers. But before that, they had P90s, which that guitar has. And these guitars are some of the most desirable guitars in the world. And then after this, they go to what they call the burst guitars, which is, if you look up there, you'll see one, the sunburst with the flame top. So half of 58 is gold, and then the other half of 58 is like that. And they made them like that into 1960. And then Les Pauls become SGs. Sometimes people will call me and they'll say, I have a 1965 Les Paul. And I'm like, okay. That doesn't exist. So there's no such thing as a Les Paul between 62 or 3 and 68. Les Pauls don't exist. There's SGs, and the early SGs are Les Pauls. So 62, 3, 61, 2, and 3 are still called Les Pauls, but they're SG shapes.
Like Mary Ford's guitar.
Yeah, exactly. And what confuses people, and I'll tell you guys right now, is the biggest thing that confuses people with Gibson guitars is the serial numbers are confusing, and they reuse the same numbers. So let's say you might have a 60s guitar that's a 6-digit number that begins with 100. So you have like 100,000 and like 100525. And that serial number may be used 2 or 3 more times later, in the 60s or the 70s. So people will look up the serial number and they'll think they have a 60s guitar. But like in 1969, they put this thing called Made in USA. It's like a stamp. They put Made in USA in it. So if it's a 100,000 serial number with Made in USA, it's a 70s guitar with same serial number. And that every week somebody calls me and tells me they have a 60s guitar, that's a 70s. It happens that way. But anyway, this is just a wonderful guitar. My friend found it in a barn. It was the dirtiest guitar that I ever owned. The knobs are still black. My repair guy cleaned it for like 2 days. I mean, this is the clean version of this guitar. There's grooves in the pick guard and also in the plastic. It was just played to death. I had it professionally refretted because the frets were gone. And it's just, I think it's a great sounding guitar.
How many
What did you think about it?
do you, like, how many were made of those?
This is one of the rarest Les Pauls because humbucker gold tops are pretty rare. I went through this phase where I was trying to get like every weird variant of Les Paul, and this is one of the last ones I found.
Hundreds of thousands?
Oh, there's more than you think. There's probably, I'm guessing, probably 400 or 500 of these in this version.
500?
100, just 100, which is actually in the collector world pretty many. And you know that's another thing. Is people think like the bursts are like the rarest Les Pauls. They're actually not. They made probably 1,500, bursts.
So the pickup rings and the scratch guard worth a few bucks too.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time period where people would sell just the rings off of gold tops for bursts, and they would sell like it's insane. But the rings for the humbuckers were like 10 grand. They probably still are, or more. Just the plastic pieces. Because the only other guitars that had those are the guitars that are like $400,000. So, it was almost worth it to just rob that guitar. A lot of people did that, actually, back then.
Do you sell those, or is that private stock for yourself?
That's one of my guitars. Actually, everything here is not like a guitar that I'm selling, unless you twist my arm. So, yeah, I mean, in the Les Paul world, that's a pretty cool guitar. I'm going to need your help with that one.
What would that Les Paul sell for?
If I had to price that guitar, I would probably price it around 150.
150,000?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know if it would sell.
No,
Yeah.
I was just curious.
But-
like if you were going to insure it,
Yeah,
you would insure it for
Yeah.
800 probably.
yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay, yeah.
My insurance agent's sitting right there.
Where's
So-
the
We got them taken care of.
This is a 57. Remember I said the humbucker started in 57? Well, this is the last of the P90s. So, real quick, Les Pauls came out, they had this weird trapeze tailpiece on them, sort of like an archtop guitar. And that went on to 53. And then in 53, they started like a rat tail tailpiece, and you guys can go out and look. And then in 55, they started this variant. So from 55 to early 57, they look like this. And this is what's called a stop tail tune-o-matic gold top. This is a tune-o-matic bridge, and this is a stop tail. Another sort of weird variant, and the reason I brought this one is because, once again, to find a stop tail tune-o-matic 57 is very difficult because almost all these are 55s and 6s. And also this has what they call a dark back, which they randomly did in the 50s. They made them darker color.
Did they ever do a dark back 57 humbucker?
Did I ever do what?
Did they ever do a dark back?
Yeah, they did a few dark back ones. I think I might have one in my collection, but that's actually not as unusual as to find a 57 P90 guitar thing. And they've rarely wasted things, so this is all speculation on my part of having a lot of them. If they had a guitar like this, like sitting back, and for some reason it didn't get sold, eventually it would sell it. So you'll occasionally find like a guitar in 59 that's a 57, but it'll have a 59 serial number. It happens, and people think, like Well, maybe that guitar was special ordered. It's my belief that they probably just said, hey, that guitar doesn't need to be sitting there. Send it out to somebody, and it got sold. So there's a lot of weird ones like that. You guys can check this one out if you want. It's a pretty light guitar.
That top car on that thing.
Yeah. Another thing about Gibson guitars, and that one, and I don't know if it's because it's a dark back or not, but a lot of the finish is kind of, especially there's these guitars called all gold. They made some where they painted the back too gold. And the finishes are really thick, and it has the same effect that guitar has, where it's kind of cakey on the back and the neck, and a lot of times it's worn off. So that's what's going on there. Give me a V's, both V's.
Ooh.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Nice.
So obviously this is a Flying V guitar. A friend of mine, as a joke years ago, placed an ad in the old Trading Post, and he acted like he had like a 50s V, and he called it a Flying Arrow guitar. So he acted like he was an old man, because back in the days there was all kinds of people like me that would hunt this stuff down, and we were just obsessed with it. And we would hunt, through the papers, and we would go across the country and buy this kind of stuff. And we all kind of knew each other, and it was real competitive. But anyway, my friend placed this ad. He wrote in there, old 50s guitar, Flying Arrow. I live in I think he said Ashland, Kentucky, or something like that. And he made up this crazy address. And he said, just drive down Route 8 until it dead ends, which it does dead end. And it was just a wild goose chase. So that went on. It was notorious. People would come and tell me about it, or they would tell him about it. There's this guy, he's got a flying V. But anyway, 50s Flying Vs are quite different than these. And I've talked a lot at the other seminars about the original ones. I thought I would talk a little bit about the 70s Vs. So with Flying Vs, you have the 50s ones, which there's very few of. And they're made of Carina wood, and they look like that guitar, that Explorer over there. They're that color. And then in 1967, they made a guitar that's very similar to this guitar, except that it had a tremolo, a Maestro tremolo on it, but basically it was this guitar. And then right after that, they made a medallion guitar, which was this guitar with a medallion on it. And they were limited. I can't remember how many, maybe 200 or something. And then they started production. This guitar is at early 70s. I can't remember the year. I think it's a 71. And it's sort of like a leftover medallion, or maybe they made a handful. But this is much rarer than pretty much all the other guitars up here. There's probably not more than, 5 or 10 1970, 71 Flying Vs. They really didn't start mass producing these till about 71 or 2. And if you look at the headstock, as opposed to this one, which is I think this one's a mid-70s, 75 or something. See how pointed it is? It's quite a bit different. And it also has this giant, what they call volute, this hump right here on the back of the neck. And this one doesn't. Not quite as much.
So what year's the black one?
It's probably 76 to 78, somewhere in there.
And it doesn't have a volute.
It has a small one. It might be a little bit later. 79 or 80. Yeah, yeah, so, this is what you see much more of these Vs. And even these are really pretty desirable instruments. I have pretty many Vs, and this is one of the more rare ones. So you can also kind of tell the body shapes are a little bit different on the back, the way they join the body. See this step here? The heels are different. So, it's almost like they were experiencing, how are we going to make these guitars and mass produce them? And they hadn't really arrived at this yet. So anyway, you don't see these very often. And the black ones are pretty rare as well. by the time you get to the mid-'70s and into 1981, there's a lot of different colors, and the colors are pretty collectible too. There's like a black and a silver and a red, and a friend of mine, he has the Flying V page, has all the colors, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I mean, this is Michael Schenker played these Vs, and a lot of Japanese collectors love Flying Vs. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Maybe another one.
Are those mahogany underneath?
They are solid mahogany. You know, me and Elton were playing some of these yesterday, just making sure they were working and stuff. And it's crazy how different the bodies sound. You wouldn't think that this would sound that different than like a Firebird or an SG, because it's really not that different. It's you know, it's two humbuckers and on a mahogany, same scale length and everything, but they actually sound quite a bit different, right? Yeah.
So you think the shape of the body, the wood shape, has an effect on
I think it does, yeah. I mean, it's quite a bit different.
That makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah, man, you'll dig this. So this is the second bass I brought with me, because a friend of mine who didn't show up told me to bring basses. But anyway, this is a super, super rare bass. I think there was 22 of these made. Gibson people will know what I mean when I say EB3. There's a 2-pickup Gibson bass that has these 2 pickups. And they made a handful between 1960 and 62 of these, what they call Newport basses, Newport Deluxe basses, which is the same pickups as an EB3 bass. Most of the Newport basses were single pickups, but they made a handful of these 2 pickup ones. And this one's really clean. I've had it in my collection for a long time, and I kept it just because I'd never saw one of these before. And a good friend of mine, Gil Southworth, who was like one of the original dealers and collectors, he saw me looking at this at a show when I was just getting started. He's like, just buy that. I've never seen one before. So that's how I ended up with this guitar. And, you know, like very short scale length. You know what I'm saying? It's one of the shortest scale lengths of Gibson's. You notice the bridge is all the way down. It has the same pickups that they used on like EB3s and EBOs, the humbuckers, and what they call the mini humbuckers. This ring is actually not really metal. It's black, and they paint it to simulate chrome, so it's just silver paint. And Gibson randomly did that early on. I have a 330 guitar that has painted rings like that. You also see that on the EB3s. And then after this version of this bass, they went to 4-to-a-side headstock, what they call a batwing headstock, which is more like similar to like a fender. So the strings are all over here, and it's much more asymmetrical body shape. But this is a cool bass. You got to play it. You got to check it out. Yeah.
Is that shorter scale than an EBO?
You know, I actually was just thinking about that. It might be a little shorter, 30 something, but it might be an illusion because of the body shape. It feels little, but they always do. I love the way Gibson basses sound, but I could never get used to the scale length personally, just because I grew up playing Fenders. So this is called an EBS double neck. I think it's actually probably EBS-F because it has fuzz tone built in. And these are extremely, a handful of these made, you know, probably 20 or something. Some people might say 30.
Yeah.
This is circa probably 64 or 5. It still has, in 1964 is the last year for Gibson to have nickel parts. And then occasionally they'll have like, start weeding in chrome parts, and they'll have both. This has both. It has nickel tuners and like chrome covers. So that kind of tells you right away when I look at it what year it is. 64, maybe 65. You see that's nickel and that's chrome. It's like they were using up the old stuff. This is a really weird instrument. It has a stereo jack so that you can play both of these in stereo, and a fuzz tone built in that works on the bass. And if you read the literature, it says it works on the guitar too, but when we looked in here, I don't think it was ever hooked up to the guitar, so I don't think that's correct.
What year did you say it was?
64 or 5.
And what's the name of it?
It's an EBS-F. They made some that didn't have the fuzz, and those were EBSs.
That's like the first year of the fuzz almost, isn't it? I mean, that's pretty-
Yeah, this is the early wedge fuzz, like, the Satisfaction or whatever the famous song is. The FZ1, 1A, that's what's in here. Unfortunately, I didn't put a battery in it because I would have had to take it apart, so we won't be able to hear the fuzz. But, yeah, man, it's cool. And I don't remember, but it's really confusing. I think this might actually be the instrument selector, and this is the pickup.
Every time I've played one, it's been backwards.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what your brain would think. You would think that this would be the in-between, I can't remember. And then you have to sort of like, if you're playing with a mono jack, you got to pop out halfway. But from memory, this SG sounded killer. And basically what you have here is, remember I was talking about EB3, the Gibson EB3 is like that bass that we just had out? Well, this is the same pickups. So this is half of an EB3 and an SG stuck together. So that's what this is, with an added fuzz tone thrown in there. But, look at the scale length. It looks like it's the same scale length, right? It's just not all the way down. I bet if you measured from here to the nut, it's probably the same as that bass. Super rare instrument. Sunburst is rare as well, because almost everything in this time period is cherry. Just really, really cool one.
Was that one of the first guitars that you had to put a battery in?
That's a good question. I don't know. Probably. Seems like there was.
That was loaded from the front? You had to go under-
Yeah, you gotta go in there. I think so. Yeah, you go in there. I didn't want to leave the battery in it because when I first opened it, it had like
You don't really-
completely. I had to clean it for like 2 days to get to work. Rickenbacker. Everybody's been watching the Let It Be, I assume. Did you guys see that documentary?
Yeah.
Isn't it cool as hell? Yeah, I'm gonna watch it the second time. But anyway, this is a Rickenbacker guitar, famous, for their 12 strings and the jangly sound that like Pete Townsend got and a whole bunch of other people, the Byrds. And this guitar sounds exactly like what you would think one would sound like. I didn't say. This is probably a 58 or 9, really early. And this is a 360. It's a wider body than what people think of as the 360s, and it's double bound. I think around 61 or 2, they change the 360s to where the top is rounded, and it's really quite a different instrument at that point. But if you go to the Fret Buzz episodes on our YouTube channel, and you find Mike Tittle, he played this instrument with his wife, and it's just a great sounding guitar.
Is that a 3-piece neck?
It is a 3-piece neck, yeah. Yeah, maple with a like a rosewood insert down the middle.
That's wild.
Yeah, yeah.
Find that one.
I think I bought it in California at some point. And these inlays that go all the way across, a real fast way to tell how old a Rickenbacker is if the frets go all the way, or the inlays go all the way across. They stop that around like 70, 71 in there sporadically. So if you see an old guitar that's all the way across, it's pretty early. And Rickenbackers were one of those companies that never really kept good records of their instruments. And it's really hard to know like how many they made and stuff. It's rare to find the early ones that are untouched. These are sort of more fragile than you would think they would be. So you don't see them very
Is it
often.
fully hollow or a semi?
It's semi. It's semi. But it does have more of a reminiscent of like a hollow body guitar. But these pickups have such a distinctive sound that it sounds very similar to like, what you would think instantly of a Rickenbacker to sound like. Another interesting thing about this is this tremolo system. This is what's called a Kaufman tremolo system. And this is the early tremolo system, one of the first ones made. If you look at Les Paul's guitars, he used these on the early Gibson prototypes. Like his very first guitars had these tremolo systems on them. Terrible tremolos, but really cool. One-piece maple too, which is kind of cool. It's a big piece of wood.
Mike, is that 2-tone, 2-volume on that, the controls?
Yeah,
What's
with a
the-
switch.
What's the fifth knob on some Rickenbackers?
It's sort of like a balance knob. Yeah, so you can balance between the front and the back pickup. So if you're in the middle position, you can have more of the front or more of the back pickup
You
as
can
opposed to
use that.
just 50%.
Instead of doing it with the volumes, you can do it with the blend.
Right, exactly. You could do that, or, like say this was a blend knob and you're in the middle position. And on this guitar, when it's in the middle, unless you turn down one of the volumes, you got basically the same output on both. Whereas on a Rickenbacker, if you blend it a certain way, it's like having an extra sound, you know what I mean? You can have just a little bit of the neck. You can achieve the same thing with the volume knob, but it's just an extra thing to do. This is a Sheridan, an Epiphone Sheridan. Epiphones between 1958 and 1968, 69 were basically just Gibson guitars. They were made in the Gibson factory. This guitar was one of the carryovers that Gibson kept that was sort of like never reproduced in a Gibson model. I mean, the closest thing to this would be probably like a 355. It's weird because, like the Casinos are 330s. They're the same guitar. It's basically the same guitar with just different inlays. But the Sheridans were a holdover from the old company and super fancy, just really, I just love Epiphones. I just think they're so cool. Especially the early ones that are between 58 and 62, because Gibson used up all the Epiphone parts. This is mid-60s, and it's just crazy light for such a big guitar. It's insane. Check this out, Jay. Come on, grab it. Yeah. Multiple binding, has crazy abalone inlays, 5/5 blinding around the body. Around the pick guard, yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Are the mini humbucks different than Gibson's?
Exact same thing. They sort of stole that idea from, well, not stole it, but they took that idea from Epiphone when they bought them, because they were making like those little mini humbuckers and the cornets and stuff, and lap steels. And I was talking about how Gibson made Epiphones and Gibsons right side by side. This is a 335. This color is called Pelham Blue, which is a really, really rare color. And it probably looks green to you guys. And the reason it looks green is because the clear turns yellow, and the yellow on top of the blue makes green. So I love Pelham Blue. I used to be obsessed by it, and I had a bunch of them. And this is one of the few guitars I kept because you don't see 335s in Pelham Blue ever. They just didn't make too many of them. And this guitar came out of California. I got it from a friend of mine who was a dealer there. I still have a 345 that I got from Howard Lease of Hart. It has gold parts. It's in Pelham Blue. And I have a 330 too. So other than that, it's just basically a normal 65, 335. Did you like the way this one sounded?
I love it.
Yeah, I think this was a great sounding one. What did you think, E? It's crazy. I mean, people think a lot of times when you see a clean guitar, this is dirty because it's been sitting in the case, but you would think, oh, it's so clean, nobody liked it, it's not going to sound good, Because I love Vibe guitars, and they generally do sound good, but it's not true. I mean, sometimes you can get a brand new guitar that's hardly been played, and it's just magical, and then vice versa.
I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, you're not shy.
I'm not shy. You ever make a 355 in Pelham Blue?
I've never seen one. I would love to have it, but I've never seen one. They probably did. You could order colors anytime you wanted.
Well, Mike, you know what I'm gonna ask? Did they make the Trini Lopez?
They made a lot of Trini Lopez's in Pelham Blue, and a lot of Trini Lopez's in colors. They made black and sparkle burgundy. One of the first Pelham Blue guitars I ever had was a Trini. Bill plays a Trini that he got from me. It sounds killer.
It is.
Yeah. I brought this guitar because it's just really weird. And it's an example of how guitar companies went through periods of change, and sometimes you'll see something strange and think it's screwed with, and it's not. What's weird about this guitar? See if you guys can tell me. Exactly. The sides are a different color. And the reason is it's an early 58. And this guitar might have been one of the first ones they ever painted in this finish. So in 57, all the 6120s, this is a 6120, a Gretsch 6120. 57, this is the 57 color, and this is the 58 color. This guitar, my repair guy actually bought off of eBay, and my repair guy is like, he loves 6120s. He's like a Brian Setzer guy, and he's had a million of them. And he saw this guitar, and everybody thought it was like screwed up, and he got it really cheap on eBay because he knew, like, yeah, that's not, no, there's no way that's not original. So this finish would have probably been orange, but this newer finish faded. So for some reason they changed the dyes or something, and it faded. But this is a really clean 1958 6120, the most famous, probably most popular Gretsch guitar. Gretsch guitars are famous for like country stars and, you know, rockabilly guys. And this is the model that Brian Setzer plays. And there's a bunch of things that changed between 58 and 61 that I won't get into, but little bracing things. But the cool thing about Gretsch is Gretsch was sort of like, I think of them as like the early sort of like PRS guitars. They were super into style. They gave you, can you bring that case over? They gave you like little pamphlets with like handmade certificates and like cool cowboy straps. And you know, they did things like, you know, they put horseshoes in them. The cases have leather tooling around them. You know, they were really into style, you know, which is why a lot of country artists, I think, took to them. You can see they have little badges on the top there.
Was there a factory here in Cincinnati?
Gretsch bought Baldwin in 1972, and they changed that. Is there anything in the pocket? Is any of the paperwork in there? But anyway, they really went all out for style, man. So when you got your new Gretsch guitar, you're like, hell yeah, I got it all going on. So the reason I kept this guitar was just because the oddity of it, and this is the version that I like. It has a pickup selector and a tone cap. And before this, they don't. And this sound is like what I think of is like the Gretsch sound. A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of rock guys use these. Like Crosby, Stills and Nash, Pete Townsend. Won't Get Fooled Again is this guitar, basically. I didn't really know that. I mean, I'm like a huge Who freak. I love the Who. And my friend Ed King had one of these guitars that he bought from me. And after he bought it, he told me about how they were on the road with the Who and Leonard Skinner. And Pete was telling him that, you know, most of Won't Get Fooled Again is just this guitar, which nobody would ever thought of in a million years. So maybe you can play that, pound out the AGD for us there. But yeah, man, super cool guitar. And you can see, you know, the different colors on the guitar. And before this, the earlier ones have all these horseshoes and kind of country motif up and down the neck. Marty Stewart was here a couple weeks ago, and I had one of his guitars, and he sort of stole, was it the Gretsch stuff that he took that from? He stole the 6120 inlays for his Martin
There's one
guitar.
on the headstock that's on his guitar. That one.
Yeah. So if you look at the Marty Stewart Martin, you'll see the similar inlays.
So is that the one that came off eBay, or is that?
This is the one that came off eBay, and I got it from my repair guy.
How long ago was that?
Not that long ago. I think he got it probably 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that. Yeah, but we got it, and we were like, wow, this is so weird. You know, it's like, they literally painted the sides with a different paint than they did the whole guitar, which is...
And everybody didn't buy it because they thought it was some
Well, for years it would have looked the same, but then it faded and it got weird, and everybody thought, oh, well, the top and the back's been repainted, but it's not. So So anybody got any questions, man, or want to talk about anything in particular? Anything?
The Gretsch,
Yeah.
what are the pickups on the Gretsch? Is it the Filtertron?
Those are Filtertrons. Before that, they have DeArmonds, which are
Armaments.
which are different kind of pickups. If you look at this double neck over here, the guitar side has DeArmonds. Those are Gretsch pickups in that guitar. And also the Sparkle Jet guitar, which is a 56, has the same pickups.
How are they different than like a Fender single coil or a Gibson humbucker? How are the Filtertron pickups?
They actually are humbuckers, but they're like very, very sort of weak output. So they tend to be bright. They're like really bright. They're very reminiscent of like a Rickenbacker guitar. You know, and maybe you want to play a little bit, Scotty? Sure. Yeah, we can like kind of listen to these things a little bit and hear the differences. It's real fast here, Scotty. So if the volume's all the way up, play for a second. That's the tone knob. That's your pickup slider.
Nice.
Yeah.
We'll do an A-B here.
Sure. Another one of the guitars that had sort of like the muty,
Yeah.
the mute thing like these Esquires had, which was an early thing that they would, when they were like kind of simulating bass playing with their thumb, they would use that mute sound. It's kind of a lost art now. Nobody really plays with that sound. We were talking about Esquires earlier, and I play an Esquire, and Scotty said, do you ever use the mute sound? And the only time I ever do that is I have if you guys know what an auto-wah is, like a T-wah, sometimes it'll spiky. If I'm playing out and I kick up my T-wah and it's spiking too high, I'll flip it over to the mute sound and it rounds it off. But other than that, no one ever uses the mute sound anymore. Yeah. 40 pounds of jewelry on, too.
Yeah, how do you play with all the
That's my 1,000 hours right
We'll have to get used to that. I warned you.
There's a Deox.
But anyway, you can hear the brightness of the pickups. I like the middle sound in Rick's.
You're supposed to play. That's what happened when you wear 20 pounds of jewelry.
That's some dead strings too, guys. Anyway, you can hear the brightness. So, in that world, a Telly or an Esquire also has a very similar sound. It's in the top frequency range of most guitars. Yeah, that's straight through. That's the lead setting.
Yep.
Yeah. Show them like how you can roll off the middle position. So that's the tone knob in the middle there. Yeah, give us the mute. Yeah, man.
John Elton, this is very much like that Page,
It is.
back pickup telly.
Yeah, Jimmy's was a rosewood board, but that does sound pretty much
Yeah.
dead on it. It's crazy, people think of like country, chicken picking
Right.
when they think of tellies, but to me, they're almost like metal guitars. I mean, my guitar is like super screamy like that thing is. If you play with a little amp and wide open it, it's crazy. So I don't remember which one had the low output, but let's listen
think
to
it
the
was this
difference.
I think that one was the louder one.
Uh-oh, I've confused the cases.
This one may be lower output.
Yeah, so it's, that one sounds clearer, right? Because the louder pickup distorts the amp more, so it squashes it and compresses it, which makes that one, you would think that would be the louder output, but it's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which one do you like the sound of better? The first one or the second? You like that one better? Yeah.
It's got a different mid thing than that one does.
It
in that
does,
mute,
yeah.
mute position.
I would say if I was playing a smaller amp, I'd probably play that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. They feel similar though, don't they?
Scotty, which one feels better in your hands, or is there a difference?
They are very similar as far as
Really not
that goes.
different.
Yeah. I think I do
You
prefer
guys
that
can
one.
check them out if you
And
want.
that's kind of what goes to the, like, you have two of them so close together, but they still have different sound nuances, you know?
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes no
it's
sense.
like, no
Yeah.
two sound alike, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it to me. Is, when you get to where Mike is, where he's had everything there is to have, and he gets to finally, okay, I know I like this, and I know I like that. Finding those things is the cool part, because, two guitars built on the same exact day are that different,
Yeah.
sonically. The feel is not that different to me. I don't think they feel that different, but there's something about that. It may be that it squashes the amp, that I like it so much better for what I do,
Right.
But either of them sound incredible. I mean, to me, you put one pickup, because there's always the argument that the Les Paul junior guys have, where the one pickup pulling on the strings sounds completely different than a guitar with two pickups pulling on the strings.
I think they
because of
feel
song.
different. I mean,
And, yeah, I do too.
They do feel different for sure.
I absolutely do. And you've got an empty cavity here for resonance. So
Yeah.
it's essentially a chambered Telecaster because it doesn't have a front pickup.
And you gotta realize, when these guitars were made, the wood was probably really old even then. So, especially when it came to Gibson stuff, a lot of that wood was wood that was super old when they made those guitars. So it's not like nowadays where they go cut the wood 2 weeks before they make them. Come on in, Robert.
So were those woods kiln dried back then, or just aged?
No, they just stacked it in a corner, man, or somewhere outside in a barn or something. I just got a Taylor guitar, and I talked to Robert Taylor because it's like some limited guitar that he made, like 7 of or something, like personally was involved in making. And he said in 1969, the wood that he made that guitar out of, they stole out of the dumpster of the Martin factory. It's Brazilian rosewood. He said because they would just throw away shit back then. It was like the last of the Brazilian rosewood, and Taylor went and took it. So,
So all Esquires from the period have the same route as the Telly?
yeah, basically it's the exact same body. If you took the pickguard off, the hole for the pickup would be there, and the route would be
Was
there.
that a money saving thing, or was it conceptual or both?
Oh, I'm sure it was money saving. Leo was notorious for that.
Those guitars were never supposed to be refretted. You just replace the neck. That's
Right.
why everything bolted on.
Yeah. They used to send people out and they would stand on the neck, like 2 bricks. The reps would stand on the neck to show you how solid the necks were and stuff. But these were, utilitarian type instruments. And they still are. I mean, to me, it's like the perfect guitar, but it's so freaking simple. It's like a piece of slab,
Right.
It's like,
Well, it does what it's supposed to.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of manufacturers, in my opinion, I'm like you. I like the stuff that's there for a reason. So many of these manufacturers put things, shiny bells and whistles on everything, and they don't do the essential job they were created to do. They're
know.
pretty,
Yeah.
but they don't do what this does.
yeah, yeah.
Oh man, now Mike, I got 5 strings. I
That's all right.
hope that wasn't original.
I don't think so. So this setup with the 3 single coils was like ingenious when Fender came up with this. And he was involved with a lot of musicians, and they were playing with tones, and also this contoured body. It's just, I think it's a piece of art. I mean, I love Strats. I got a little burned out on them because everybody was playing them all the time, but I just love the idea of a Strat. Now, the first ones just have what they call a 3-way pickup selector. And then later on in 1975, they go to 5 ways. But you can achieve the same sound by kind of jamming it in that position like that.
That was the Hendrix trick.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, so that's a maple neck.
5 string and maple neck.
5 string.
Keith Richards.
Keith Richards version.
It's the wrong. I'm not going to bend any more strings today.
No,
Mike.
bend them. Those aren't that old. I put those strings on there recently.
He needs an ear.
Instant Stevie Ray.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so you recognize the sound of that rosewood board instantly.
And in my opinion, the finishes make a huge difference too. This got a lot more and a lot harder finish than this does.
Oh, yeah. There's like not a lot of finish left on that.
Yeah.
Did you notice how Scotty played like the first part of the lick on the treble? And and then as he started like going down the neck, he flipped it to the bass. That's cool. Yeah.
Well, it's, I learned to do that from making those notes stick out.
Right.
When you're from. So it's as much of an effect as it is anything,
Yeah, man.
Yep, that's a great guitar.
So, enough of these old bolt-on guitars. So, all right, since we'll go from the P90s to the humbuckers real fast.
Oh, yeah, that was that. Gibson's single coil. So what we just heard in these guitars, the Esquires and the Stratocasters are single coils too, but these are like giant single coils, and you can just, they're massive, man. If you hear the hum, that's one of the reasons they came up with this pickup, which is the humbucking pickup. You know how quiet it is instantly? And they achieve that by having two coils next to each other. I think it's some kind of magnetic reversing. I'm not an engineer, but basically that's how they do that and change the world of guitar. I mean, if I could describe that sound, it's just rock and roll.
Yeah, it's real silky.
Yeah.
And it's remnants of like almost like a saxophone-y kind of deal. That guitar, I love the neck pickup on that guitar too. That's another one of those examples where you can have a really clean guitar. Hey, grab that 335. You can have a really clean guitar and it sounds great, and then a super wood guitar and it sounds great, and vice versa. And like I said, that was one of the dirtiest guitars I ever bought. It was literally covered in black dirt. If you still look really close under the knobs, it's still filthy.
And even the checking.
Oh yeah, and that's major cleaning was done. And I had to refret it because it was super wasted frets. Which, by the way, those are exact same correct kind of frets.
What year did you say that was again?
It's a 58, the last of the gold top markers. Oh, do you want to play any? You want to play this? You want 335, so let's give an opportunity. Yeah. Jenny, you want to play? the 335s and Les Pauls, they can do the same thing, you know, pretty much. But it just has that extra little airy acoustic vibe to it. You know?
Screams BB.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Do you know any blues?
No. I was telling Elton earlier, it's unbelievable how far the replica and reproduction pickups really are from the real thing.
It really is, isn't it? You know,
They've tried and they've tried for, 30, 40 years now to replicate it.
yeah, they can't pull it off.
And it's just not there.
Well, I think part of it is the magnetism wears off.
Yeah.
You know, things change over time.
Well, it's illegal to use half the materials they used back then, too.
Right.
So they've made it illegal for good guitar tone is illegal.
You know, they have came a long way, though.
Yeah. Very different.
Yeah, the mini humbuckers are weird to me. When I hear mini humbuckers, they sound like tellies to me. It's strange. You know, and like if you play a deluxe Les Paul, I love deluxes. A lot of people don't like deluxes, but it's quite a bit brighter. You notice the difference instantly, you know.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like the Firebird thing. You know, I know you guys were talking about the shape of the guitar having a little bit to do with the tone, but it's got a very Firebird-esque sound to it.
It does, and that's just the pickups. They're the same pickups, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Not a winner.
You play a bird, right? You play Firebird?
Non-reverse. So it's got humbuckers in it. I don't have P90s. Sorry, it's mini humbuckers.
Yeah.
It's a totally different guitar than it was in '58.
Yeah, completely different guitar.
Not even the
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's different.
One bushy sounding guitar.
So I don't know if we can get this to work because of the weird jack, but we'll try. And the reason is basically this SG guitar and that guitar are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all the same scale length, same pickups, you know, exactly the same woods, same thickness actually. Okay, can we get this to work? this
Yeah.
is instead of the other, the Maestro thing. You play SGs very much?
But SG is my number 2 guitar.
Yeah.
After the Les Paul, I go with SG for sure.
What, mostly Spider or both?
No, both.
Yeah.
I had a 61 Junior for a while, and I liked it, but I hadn't yet figured out how low they have to hang because I have these long arms. I just look like Magilla Gorilla playing an SG. So I took them way down, and they felt better, and they looked a lot cooler.
Yeah. Which matters, you know?
Yeah.
You gotta feel cool. One more thing we'll do before we call it quits. And we were talking about how it's hard to reproduce the pickups. This is basically the mic reproducer, which was the reproduction of my Les Paul. And they spent a lot of time to try to make these pickups just like it. But you know, it's not the same, you know?
You got your mic cord hooked on your.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it, brother.
Sir, man.
It's a good sounding guitar.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, what's disappointing is the reissue doesn't cut it compared to the other ones.
Yeah,
That's why you're in the business you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice front pickup.
Here, quick comparison. It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, how the PAFs sound. Instantly, you can hear the difference.
I mean, it's not as drastic as I initially thought. But
No, I mean, you know,
But-
it's
but
mild.
But it's, you know,
Yeah.
it's
A lot of it is a feel thing too.
Yeah.
It's because there's so many things that like you don't hear from the audience. I'm saying this as a listener to other artists. There's so much that you don't pick up on that you do when you're actually the guy holding the instrument.
Right.
Whether it's the amount of sustain that you're going to get out of a note that you may not hear it, but you'll feel it.
Yeah, it's going to affect the way you play the next note
And
too.
it's absolutely, and it's so, and that's one of the cool things about these old guitars is there's such, I mean, it's at the back of the neck. You know, there's nothing coming out of any factory anywhere right now
Yeah.
that feels like that because that's real. And you
Yeah.
can fake it, you know, but there aren't a lot of, you know, people with stick drawings of the Mona Lisa on the refrigerator either. There's real and then
I
there's
have
not. One thing I really do love about these is there's a level of attack that you hear from a pick, and Page did it all the time. Jimmy Page did it all the time. But it's that noise right before you hit the note that it. You'll notice it until it's not there, and then you go, "What happened?" And a lot of that is the pickup, picking up those frequencies that a lot of new pickups don't.
plug in, or give it a jam.